What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Games Adjuster Ethan Rodriguez, and today we are discussing a big Kickstarter game that came out late 2020. My brother actually backed this one, so I am borrowing it from him, and that is going to be this monstrosity here, Dwellings of Eldervale. So, Dwellings of Eldervale is a Amerithrashi / Euro hybrid of a game where you'll be placing units and workers to activate realms on this modular board, as well as activating cards when you regroup them. And so let me first go to the table and kind of show you how it plays. I'll try to make it as concise as I can. There's a lot going on. And then we'll come back here for some final thoughts on the game and what I think about it. So here we go. Okay, let's jump right into it. There's a lot going on in this game, so I'm going to break it up into 3 distinct pieces. I'll first talk about the player boards, then I'll talk about the main scoreboard and the things that are going on there, as well as the cards that you'll be getting, and then I'll talk about the board and kind of taking your action. So first, let's look at these player boards. Every player at the beginning of the game is going to get one of these game trays with these resources in them. So you've got the houses that are going to be your dwellings, these roofs here. You've got one of each resource. You've got gems, scrolls, potions, hammers, and these swords. You've also got a space for gold coins. Those are considered wild. You don't start with any of those. Every player is going to get 6 dice in their own color. You're going to get a total of 6 of these cylindrical wooden pieces that you'll be placing in various locations on the main scoreboard. And then you'll have your workers. So these are screen printed workers. You've got 3 meeples, just basic workers. You'll start with 3 of them. The rest of these workers you can unlock. And then you've got special ones. You've got a wizard, the warrior, and then a dragon. Okay, so every player is going to have one of these. And with these different colors are different factions. So let's kind of discuss the one that I'll be playing today. It's a 2-player game we've got set up. For example, we're going to be the red player, and the red player can be the Ember Crush Ogres, or I could be the Fire Witch Goblin. So all of the color factions are double-sided with unique abilities. 2 of your 4 unit types between workers, warriors, wizards, and dragons will have special abilities. The Ember Crush Ogres have abilities for their warrior and their workers, and you can see here workers, for example, brutal strength. They roll 2 dice in battle as opposed to the normal 1, which you'll see here on a worker without abilities. Whereas this warrior here has Battle Rager. Each time your warrior is in a battle, gain a point, whether you win or lose. Very cool. Every faction has unique abilities, so we'll talk about, let's see this one, the player we're playing against, the Clerics of the Dawn, has an ability for their dragon and their workers, and the Pride of Bastet has abilities for their wizard and their warrior. All unique die, that's on each, not unique die, but different amounts of dice you may need to roll based on your abilities. But the usual default is 1 die for the workers, 2 for the warrior, 1 for the wizard, and then 3 for the dragon. And there's a wide variety of factions. There are 8 total factions. You've got the Atlanteans and their double-sided counterparts, the Shadow Demons, the Elves of Briardell, the Storm Horde, the Rattlings of the Swarm, and the Wardens of Evenmarch. So again, all of these are double-sided. Ton of variety on who you choose. I'm sure there's someone for everybody. Now, moving on. You'll also start with 5 of these magic cards. And so these magic cards here are considered also a resource, and you can have a hand limit of 7. I should also mention, as printed here on your tray, each of these resources can only have a 5 max, including the gold whenever you get those. But these magic cards are going to be given to you at the beginning of the game, and they can be used at various times during the game. Some of them, like this Lord of War, are considered in-game scoring bonuses. This one says at the end of the game, this card is worth 3 points if your marker is on the final space of the glory track or on a higher numbered space than other players. And we'll talk about the glory track shortly. Some of them can be played at specific times. This one can be played when a battle would be triggered. Instead, no battle is triggered. Some of them will cost resources to play. This one here says you can either spend a gem or have 1 element on the purple elemental track. If you do, you can play after you roll dice for any reason. You may re-roll up to 3 of the dice. So you've got the in-game score cards, you've got cards that can be played during various times in the game. You've also got quests. This one here is called Amass Wealth. To complete this quest, you must have at least 1 gold in your supply. When you complete the quest, you'll just announce it on your turn. You will gain 1 point for each gold in your supply. So the max here would be 5 points because that's how much gold you can store. And that would be the most opportune time to play it. And there's a wide variety of the cards here that will come in this fancy game tray here, which also houses your resources. And then here's a wide variety of those cards. So every player will start with 5 of those. Start with your tray. You will get the tokens in their respective spaces, and you are ready to begin. So now that we've kind of gone over what you get to start the game, actually I'll mention this card too. This card is one of the cards that will be in your tableau and will have a variety of actions that you'll do when you regroup. So let's talk about the main scoreboard and the cards you'll be collecting throughout the game, and then we'll get into the board. Here we go. So here I have got the main board that players will be tracking their points on, as well as their progress on the elemental track. Below the board, I've got this vault here of cards. And so when you take certain actions throughout the game, you will get the opportunity to grab one of these cards. The top card on every stack is going to be the door card that is going to give you the opportunity to get certain items and resources, as well as collect other resources if you were to put one of these tokens on this space and you were to be the leader in that particular elemental track. So here, if I'm the leader in the yellow track, I would get 2 more swords in addition to the scroll when I perform this action. And then you only will have active cards using the colors that are in the game. For a 2-player game, there are 2 player colors. We've got red and yellow. We've also got 2 random colors. We chose green and purple for simplicity. And we have got our starting tokens on the board here. So on the board you can see we've got a marker to track how many points we've got. You've got 3 extra markers to represent the different elemental tracks which will possibly move up. And then you've also got the starting markers that you're on. The red player will start on the level 1 space of the red track, and the yellow, of course, on the yellow track. You've also got some orbs on the color tracks that are in the game, and those are important for when you have different opportunities to gain orbs, such as going up this glory track. And these orbs will give you other abilities and different resources that you can gather by spending the orbs. Okay, and so basically the elemental track is important because that's going to be in-game scoring. If we take a look at in-game scoring here, you'll see that you will get points for the amount of progress you made on the elemental tracks. You'll also get points for each dwelling you've made times the elemental power that you're at. So for example, if I have 3 dwellings in the red areas, then I'm on the, let's say the 5, I've made it all the way up on this elemental track, well, I'm going to get 5 points for each of those dwellings, which would be, of course, 15 points, which can be very good. And so you'll also get points for your starter card, which we showed earlier, this card here, times the elemental power that you've made, as well as any adventure cards that you'll get, which are these cards here, again, using that same elemental power. Now, if you don't get your progress in these different elemental tracks as good, then you're not going to score as many points. So you kind of want to specialize almost, and just a couple, just to make sure you really get as much power as you can. So that's why that elemental track is important. The glory track is going to be important for when you are doing combat. So anytime you win a fight, you will move up on the glory track and you'll collect different resources. So here you've got 2 points. Any 1 resource, move up any elemental track. Get the orb or take 2 points. Any 1 resource, again, elemental track, either or, get any 2 resources, and then every time you go after that, you just get 2 more points. At the top of the board are spaces where you can spend your orbs. And so each orb can only be spent on one of the spaces. The top one here, you get 3 points, 2 points, 2 cards, a card and a gold, gems, etc. There's a ton of variety in which you can get, and once they're taken, no one else can get those particular resources. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the main board and what you'll be doing in the game. Okay, so we've got the board set up here again for 2 players, and on the board, it's actually made of these modular tiles. here. And there's specific rules on setup. You'll basically take all of the elemental tiles that you'll need for the game that you're playing. Again, 2-player game, we're going to use 4 different elemental tiles. There's 3 for each color, so that's 12 tiles there. We'll take a certain number of these ruin tiles, which are these brown ones here, and then we'll shuffle those together. We'll take out a number of elemental tiles, combine those with the ruins, put those out, and then we'll have extra elemental tiles here. And you can see all of these here. And now when we start the game, we're only going to have 1 monster present, and you can see we've got the deluxe version, which does come with these pre-washed miniatures. Very cool. There's also audio bases that you can put on the bottom of these if you want to. I have not done that here, but they are in the box, and you can definitely do that if you want to. Otherwise, you can just use the standees that come in the box. Now, this is a worker placement, kind of worker pooling game. And so when you play the game on your turn, you can either regroup your workers or place your workers out. The first placement that you make can be at any unoccupied area. So in this example, let's say we go ahead and go here with our worker. When you go to a space, if it's an elemental realm, then you can take the top token here and either spin that for the resource by getting 1 wood in this example, or you could save that for later and put that onto your game tray. Your game tray can hold 4 of these for storage later, and these tokens can also be used on certain cards to change what you might receive for those benefits. Now, these can be spent as a free action anytime during your turn, so if you decide that you want to go ahead and use it right away, you can, and you'll just discard it here, and you'll get the resource right away. Now, after you've placed for the first time, you will get to place other workers or units adjacent to that worker there. So, for instance, this one could be placed here at the mill. The wizard has a special ability when you activate him, when you get him, that he can be placed anywhere. The dragon can be placed 2 away, and the warrior has this ability called aggression, wherein it is the only exception to the rule of not placing immediately where another unit is. So if I had the yellow player here, I could go straight there with the warrior because I have an adjacent path, and if it was my first placement, I could jump straight in there. Okay? Now, why are you trying to go to these different areas? Well, you're trying to collect dwellings. The game will end in one of 2 ways. Either A, a player has made all 6 of their dwellings, or B, a player has found all of the realms here. We've gone through this entire stack of tiles that have been placed into the active play area. So, after you've placed the workers you're going to place, and players will take their turns placing a worker, and then the next player will go and either place or regroup, etc., until it gets back to you. If you've decided, hey, I don't have any more workers to place, or I do not want to place any more workers right now, you can regroup. When you regroup, you will pull back all of your workers one by one and take actions on any of the adventure cards that you have, including your starter card. For example, this action here can be activated with the worker and will allow you to summon other units. So this one here, you can pay any 1 resource, 2 resources, or 3 resources to get your first, second, and third extra worker. You can pay 2 hammers and a sword to get the warrior. You can pay these to get the wizard and pay these to get the dragons. That's one way you can get more units. Here, you can gather and get a particular resource. Here it's the gem, but other characters will get you maybe swords or potions or wood. Here at the hammer rather, when you dwell, that's one of the most important parts of the game. You will need to have another worker already in a space. So here we'd have to use this one, that's a warrior. And if it's there and you have the resources to spend, so here 2 hammers, if you spend those resources, you can take one of the roofs in your tray, put that onto the worker like so, and then place that worker back in the area and move up on the elemental track that number of spaces. So here it's 1 green, and I would take my green marker and put it on the appropriate track. Some of them will allow you to move up 2. Now this is important because not only will you move up the track, you'll also score points at the end of the game, but you'll also score points now. When you build a dwelling, you will get 2 points times the number of ruins surrounding the area. So here that's 6 points. That's very good. If there was, let's say I built it here, and there was another dwelling, let's say mine or someone else's perhaps, next to me, then I would also get 2 points for that. So if I had built that new dwelling here, I would get 2, 4, 6, plus 2 more, 8 points right away and move up on the score track. All right, and now let's talk about what some of these ruins do. The elemental areas will just grant you different resources. If there are 2 different piles of these stacks, you'll just choose one or the other, not both. Collect that and either spend it right away or save it for later. If you ever clear out the areas, there's a default printed resource that's available. And that's basically all the elemental realms. They're all going to be here. There are some realms that have monsters. But before we get to the monster, that's basically the last thing we'll talk about. Let's talk more about these ruins. So these ruins are other actions that you can do in the game. If you were to place someone at the mill, that is another way that you can build a dwelling without having to use your adventure card and regrouping. And same thing, you would have to have an eligible player to, or eligible worker to build the dwelling with, and you could do that action right away by spending the appropriate resources. At the portal is another way to summon, again without having to regroup. You still have to pay the appropriate costs. At the mage tower, you can spend any 2 resources, and cards do count as resources as well as the ones that we've showed earlier, to draw 3 magic cards and discard 1 of them. So that's a good way if you are going for a card scoring strategy. You can get a lot of quests maybe, or end of game scoring opportunities, and filter those cards that you don't want with cards that you do want and use those to get a lot of points at the end. Here at the fortress, you can spend any 2 resources to get 2 gold, and gold is wild. And then the dungeon, which again is one of the ways that you'll end the game by revealing all of the realms, and it's another way that you can get points using the cards that are available in the adventure decks. So when you go to the dungeon, the first thing you'll do is place out a new tile, and this tile must be placed so that it's adjacent to 2 other areas. So we might put that up here next to the fortress and the mage tower. It has to be touching 2 tiles. If there was a monster on the tile, so let's use this as an example, we would immediately put the monster onto the board, and then we would, after that, regardless of whether there's a monster, we would put out the appropriate number of tokens in that area. So here we'll put 3 of these purple, and they go face up just like that. Next time someone goes there, they will get a magic card. Okay, and then in addition to that, you will need to buy one of these adventure cards. As we discussed earlier, they will have cost printed on the right. The starting door cards are always going to be 2 of certain resources, but other cards will maybe be 2 and 2, so 4 total resources, and give you a wide variety of abilities. This one is a wall. Each time an opponent moves up the light track, you gain a gem. Very cool. Okay, now you have to buy at least 1 card. If you cannot take the action, that goes for any of these actions, you cannot go there. So you need to make sure you have the requisite number of resources to take the action, otherwise the move would be invalid. After you've taken at least 1 card of the dungeon, you can buy another card, or you will need to at least discard a card from the available ones that are open. All right, and so let's now talk about the monsters and battling. At the beginning of the game, you will have peaceful beginnings, meaning that there is no combat. The monsters will not rush the players until all players have regrouped. Once all players have regrouped once, the extra markers that they'll all have in their tray will be placed onto the glory track to track wins in battle. And then battle will start and monsters can be engaged. If ever a player moves into a hex next to a monster, the monster will rush that player. The only exception to that would be if there's already a monster there. There can only ever be 1 monster in each area, and they would not rush in that instance. If they move into an area like here, then the player will choose which monster they want to rush. And there are 8 monsters in the base game. If you have the legendary version of this, there are 8 more monsters. Each monster has a wide variety of abilities and rolls a certain amount of dice. Here in this example, we've got the golden griffin here, which will roll 4 of these battle dice. And these are the monsters dice here. And it has this ability. If it is to be dominated, as long as the golden griffin is in Eldervale, you pay 1 less resource for the first adventure card you acquire each turn. When you battle, whether this is players or the monsters, you'll go through a certain amount of steps, and battle will happen anytime a monster is in the same space as a player's unit, or a player enters the same space as another player's unit. So here, this would actually be a battle. So battle is pretty simple, but it's got a few steps that we'll need to discuss. Firstly, beginning with the player to the left of the active player, each player may move any of their adjacent units into the battle realm. So if we had the warrior sitting out here and the yellow player started the engagement, then I could move mine in optionally, and if the yellow player had someone else to move in, they could move their player in as well. Then we would determine how many battle dice each player gets. When you determine battle dice, you are first going to count your units, then your dwellings, and any other modifiers you may have. So if we reference the red player's board here, the warrior is going to give us 2 dice. The worker is going to give us 2 more dice. And because we have a dwelling in the area and adjacent, we'll get the last 2 dice. We'll roll 6 total dice for the red player. If you had magic cards, you could add those as well, and those might give you more dice. The most dice you can ever roll, however, is your full 6. So here, if we were going to play this out, the yellow player would roll 2 dice, the red player would roll their 6, and then we would compare. When you compare the dice totals, you are going to line them up based on the highest amount sorted to the lowest amount and see if there is a clear winner with the highest amount being by themselves. So in this example here, because red has rolled a 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that's actually kind of crazy. They would win 6-3, their highest die, and the battle would be over. If, however, yellow had a 6 as well, those would cancel each other out. We go to the next comparison, 5-1, meaning the red player wins. If, however, they had gone a complete tie, let's say red only rolled 2 dice, and they were still tied with all dice being equal, then all players would lose and be eliminated from the battle. And that includes, again, any other players that may have joined the battle as well. All right, after the winner is determined, then the winner will move up the glory track. If the winner is against a monster, they will choose to either go up the glory track or gain the appropriate elemental marker or advancement. So here, if they beat the yellow monster here, they can go glory or get up on the yellow track. And the losers would take all of their units in the battle, excluding dwellings. Dwellings will never leave the board, and they will go to the underworld. Now, battle is, of course, good to win. You want to be able to advance in the glory track for certain quests and endgame bonuses, etc., as well as getting resources. But there is a consolation prize for losing. If you go to the underworld, you will collect 1 sword per casualty that you take. All right, and so that's battle. There can only ever be 1 unit. So here, let's say yellow's gone in the underworld. Red would maintain control of this area, and then their turn would be over. Now, after battle, that's it. You'll go to the next player. Again, we'll keep playing until either A, all the realms have been revealed, in which case the player who revealed the last realm will finish their turn, and every player, including that player, will take 1 more turn. Game will end. Or B, again, if the dwellings are made, 6 dwellings, same thing. The person who made the last dwelling will finish their turn. Every other player, including that player, will take 1 more turn, and we'll go to in-game scoring. So in-game scoring is pretty simple. Every orb that you did not spend is worth 1 point each. And I should mention, every time you advance all the way on these elemental tracks, you will get the orb that's there and be able to use that. And those orbs can not only be spent on the orb rewards at the top of the scoreboard, there are certain adventure cards that will require orbs to either empower them, making them more powerful, or be used as a resource cost, and it's a cost of 0 technically, where you can, instead of, let's say putting one of these on the left side and having to pay a hammer and a gem to get the benefit on the right side, you would need to pay nothing because the orb satisfies that requirement. All right, so you'll get those points for each orb you have. You'll score the points on the elemental markers for the progress that you've made for 5, 4, 4, 3, or 2, or nothing if you're not on any of those tracks. You'll get the points for the dwellings that you're in times the progress you made on the track. So in the example earlier, 3 times 5 for the red ones would be 15 points. You'll get your tableau cards equal to their elemental power. Now you do have to have a certain number of adventure cards to score dwellings, so each card can score you 3 total dwellings. If you only had 1 dwelling, let's say, but you had 9 cards, then you could not score all of your cards because you only have 1 dwelling. So you need to have enough dwellings to score those cards, otherwise they will not count towards the end. Then you'll get vault scoring, which is going to be those magic cards, or rather adventure cards that will have in-game bonuses, And then finally, the Prophecy Magic cards will also have in-game bonuses, and the most points is the winner. And here you'll see there's a breakdown of how many rough points you'll get in-game and end of game. So there you go. Let's go back up top. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the things I didn't cover, and I'll give you my final thoughts. Here we go. Okay, so that was Dwellings of Eldervale. Let's talk about it. We'll start with the theme. The theme is cool. Yeah, I think it's this self-made universe that Breaking Games has created. I don't know that there's any like IP or other literature or things like that ties to it. It's cool. I mean, it's just kind of generic fantasy. They do a good job with the factions and stuff that they have in the game, and I don't know if there's really like a story to it. But you know, it could have been a space theme with space monsters or something, and it would have felt the same. So the theme is cool. It looks nice, you know, but it's not anything that you know, feels very you know, unique or anything like that. It's just kind of generic. But I do like the dwellings, and so production wise, this is where it's going to get a super A+ here. It's a great production, guys. The miniatures are awesome. They have this really cool wash on them. It's got game trays in the box, and the game trays are highly functional. So I know everyone's enamored with game trays, and most of the time they're really good. There are some that kind of feel superfluous, and yes, they're cool for storing the game, but they don't really help you play the game. Here, they are very good at helping you play the game. Each player's got the game tray for themselves that not only tells you how many of each resource you can have, but it holds everything neatly for you, and it makes it easier to pack the game away and start the game, because you can leave one of each resource in the tray, put your faction board on top, put it in the box, and then next time you play, you pop it off, you're ready to go. Same thing with the resources. Rather than having a bunch of baggies in the box, or you know, wells that you just kind of pour them in, you have these self-contained resource bins that have spaces for each one, and the cards have that little lifted area at the bottom, so you can kind of push on one side, lift them up on the other. There's actually two of them in the overview. I only showed you one, but there are two, so you can have kind of one on either side of the table for each set of players. Makes it very convenient there. The tiles are fine. You know, have cool artwork, and symbology is very good. It's not a ton of but swirly things and things like that on the actual elemental realms, and the ruin tiles are kind of a little bit boring, so I would say maybe those could have used a little cooler artwork, but they have to be functional too, so I take that with a grain of salt. The workers and stuff are screen printed. That's a nice touch, looks cool. The miniatures have those audio bases, which I had not seen actually before. I don't know if it's been done in other places, but it was really cool, and it's still fun to bring out. We don't use them all the time, you know, because the audio is a little tinny sometimes, so it's kind of hard to, you know, some of the roars kind of sound the same as far as what the monster is, but it's still cool to have because it's such a unique element to the game. Not only does it give you the visual and the tactile feel, but there's also this, you know, auditory thing that's going on that's kind of neat to see. So neat to see and hear rather. So that's cool. I do have a couple minor little nitpicks that I'll mention. One is the faction boards. They're cardboard and they fit into the trays themselves. But when you're pulling them out, you can already see, even though we've only played it maybe like 5 or 6 times, on the edges, they kind of start to fray a little bit because of the lips that are on the trays that hold the board in. And so I don't know if they could have maybe just put covers for each of them like they have for the resources and the cards and things like that. But that is one minor thing we noticed, and we kind of wish like maybe it'd been different. But you know, it's again minor. It still functions well and it holds all the pieces in. Beyond that, you know, the card art kind of swirly things too, just like the tiles. So again, it's not anything that maybe needed artwork. It just has to kind of tell you what you need to know so you can play the card. But maybe a little more artwork there would have been cool, especially because they've got all these cool miniatures and creatures and stuff like that on the outside of the box, and then the miniatures themselves. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, it's outstanding. Everything else highly functional to get the game going and to play the game. And so let's jump into the rules now. Overall, I think the rules are pretty easy. It looks very intimidating up front, and there is a lot still going on as far as things that connect to each other. Conquering the area moves up on the elemental track. The elemental track's important because it helps me score those areas, but also score my cards. which area I go to is going to help me get the resources I need because I have to pay them for these cards. So the systems work together as far as the mechanisms go, but each one individually is not a hard concept. We've seen it before. Worker placement, go somewhere, get resources. Combat, roll dice, cancel dice, highest die wins. Pretty simple. So I wouldn't say the rules are that difficult. They do give you a player aid that's pretty helpful. I don't think it mentions the aggression, flight, and teleport abilities of the warrior, dragon, and wizard respectively, which I don't know why they didn't include that on the board, on the cards, but that would have been cool maybe, just a minor thing there. And there is a lot of other rules that I didn't really get into as far as mercenaries you can hire and these other ruins that I didn't put in the base game. So there's some rules for that. I don't think they're any more complex. It's just kind of more information. There is a solo mode in the game. I've not read the rules for that. I have not tried that yet, but I've heard it's pretty good. So if that's something you're interested in, you can discover that on your own. But yeah, on the whole, I would say rules are pretty easy. Once you play a couple games, it's easy enough to figure out what you need to do, and you won't be asking that many rules. Maybe just a few cards that come up every now and again what it means. Beyond that, getting into gameplay, I really enjoy it. I think it's a good mix of, again, that Euro and Ameritrash style, because you could try to play a less area control game by just going after maybe a few elemental realms and really trying to focus on your cards. And in our game group, my sister-in-law, she does that and does it well. She, I think, won like the first 3 or 4 games she played by just building a tableau of cards and then getting a bunch of quests done throughout the game, and then getting as well as the prophecy card for in-game scoring. So if you can build up a bunch of those, then you don't necessarily have to win a lot of fights and get a lot of realms and get a lot of glory and things like that. You can just kind of focus on the hand management portion and resource gathering, and you can get a good score. On the flip side, you can, get really aggressive and bring out your warrior early and start winning fights and getting points for that. You can conquer the realms and just move up a certain number of tracks. And if you have all 3 realms and you get all the way up, you can get 15 points off of that. So that's very good method as well as far as getting points. Also, strategically choosing which realms to conquer, because if you conquer the ones next to the ruins, you're going to get points for that. And you'll get points for having realms conquered next to other realms that have already been conquered with dwellings. So kind of doing that more Amerithrashy style of a game where you're rolling dice and you're battling monsters and maybe even dominating the monsters. There's cards that will let you make the monster part of your army. All of that kind of lends itself to the Amerithrash side of gaming. And so if that's something you're into, you can still do that in this game. And now probably the best way to play is using both methods, but I think you can go to the extreme either way and still do well and still win. So that's really good as far as the balancing of the gameplay and making it so that everyone kind of feels like there's something for them. There's a faction for them, and there's a play style for them that they can exceed at and do well. So I enjoy that. As far as the time goes, I do feel sometimes it can get a little long as far as some moments of AP, and then if you only have like a couple workers because you've built your dwellings too early, and that's happened to me a couple times, it can feel like your turns are not as good as other people's turns, because you might, let's say, get down to 2 or 3 workers. You put your worker out, go around, put your worker out, now you have to regroup. So everybody took forever to get back to you, especially in a 4-player game. You took your people back, it took you all 2 seconds to activate your stuff, and now you're waiting again. And so that could just be a player controlled issue, that if you do limit yourself on workers, you might have more of those turns because you'll be regrouping more often. But it is something to note, and it does kind of feel, I don't know, it kind of makes the game drag a little bit for you, and you may want to try to rush the ending by building your dwellings or finding the realms faster if that happens too much. I'll say one caveat on the gameplay, going back to that, is sometimes it can be, kind of disheartening maybe if someone knocks you out before you could build that dwelling you were really eyeballing because they brought a monster over, or they brought their warrior in, or the dragon or whatever, and you still had 6 die, right? They just rolled 1 die, but of those 6, you didn't get anything you needed. They got a 6, you got nothing but 5s or less, and you lost. And so that'll happen, which is again part of the Ameritrash way that the game can play. But yeah, it is kind of devastating, and it does kind of stink when it happens to you. I know that's happened in our group a couple of times, and the player it happens to, it's like, oh, I just spent all this effort on this one space, and now it's gone, and I didn't get to use it, and now they're going to take it, and that's a big point swing. Just because you got unlucky with a die. So just be aware of that, because it is that, really one lucky die roll could win it for you, which is good on one sense, bad if you're the person who kind of likes more of the deterministic combat. Just be aware that can be kind of swingy. So back to time though, yeah, I think overall it is pretty easy to set up. It's pretty easy to take down. It's just during the game, little moments can drag. Now, as far as variety goes, it's very, very good. Each of the monsters can be replaced with the legendary version, especially of the all-in legendary Kickstarter. The monsters will have different abilities based on which monster model you use. The elements that you use in the game, there's 8 of them total, 8 factions, and then each one is double-sided, so 16 total factions that you can use, 2 of each color. The ruins and stuff that you use, there are the base ones, but there's a few mini expansions in the game. There's mercenaries, there's the Oracle, there's the Dragon's Den, it's got the solo mode, and all of that lends itself to a good amount of variety. And then not to mention the adventure cards. There's a whole deck of them. You don't have to start with the door cards. You can just start with random cards depending on what mode you play, and they will give you a variety of ways to score points. Some will have you using the orbs to get resources if you get one of those early. Others will give you the in-game bonuses, as well as like the prophecy cards and the magic deck. There's a lot. Like I said, you can really kind of cater your play style to your strategy for winning. If you are one that likes to just do your own thing and get the cards, you can do that. If you want to be, in everybody's face, smashing things, you can do that. And so they did a good job, again, of making that variety in not only the different items that are available, but also catering to different players. So that's a really good trick that they did there, and I really enjoy that. But that's it. Overall, I really like Dwellings of Eldervale. It's going to get an 8 out of 10 for me. It's really good. It's not something that I'm going to want to always play, because it is, kind of a bigger game. And, again, there's some times where it can drag, but overall, it's really, really good. It's a good hybrid game. And so sometimes when we look at Kickstarter, you got the game trays and the miniatures and things like that, we still have to remember, is the game good? And here, I think Breaking Games did a great job. So that's it for me. Check it out. Dwellings of Eldervale gets an 8 out of 10. I've been the Games Adjuster, Ethan Rodriguez. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you on the next one.